There is a kind of pain that cuts deeper than rejection. It is the pain of being discarded, replaced, or emotionally abandoned without warning. One day you mattered, the next day you were invisible, and while she moved on with ease, you were left carrying questions, memories, and a silence that felt unbearable. Most men believe heartbreak is the end of the story. They think the damage is permanent, the loss irreversible, and the power forever gone. But the truth is far more uncomfortable for her to face, because while words, arguments, and emotional reactions fade quickly, silence does something different. Silence lingers. When you go silent after heartbreak, not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect, you remove something she never expected to lose. You remove access, you remove validation, you remove the emotional mirror that once reflected her importance. And in that removal, something inside her begins to crack. Here is what most men never realize. A woman does not lose her ego when you confront her. She loses it when you disappear calmly, when you stop explaining your pain, when you stop asking for closure, when you stop trying to be understood, because confrontation keeps you emotionally present. Silence removes you entirely. At first, she assumes your silence is temporary. She believes you are hurt, waiting, or hoping. She expects you to reach out eventually to seek answers, to ask for reassurance. This expectation protects her ego. It tells her she still matters. But as time passes and your silence remains steady, something shifts. The comfort disappears, the certainty breaks, and she begins to wonder why the emotional connection vanished without resistance. This is where silence becomes devastating, not because you wanted revenge, not because you planned to hurt her, but because your absence forces her to face a reality she was never prepared for, that she no longer has power over. How you feel that she no longer occupies space in your emotional world, that the man she believed she could walk away from quietly chose peace over reaction. A broken heart reacts. A disciplined man withdraws, and that withdrawal does something words never could. It rewrites the narrative in her mind. Instead of remembering you as emotional, dependent, or pleading, she remembers you as composed, grounded, and unreachable, and that version of you is far more difficult to dismiss. This video is not about revenge. It is about dignity. It is about understanding why silence, when rooted in self-respect, does more psychological damage than anger ever could. Because anger keeps you connected. Silence ends the emotional contract completely. She broke your heart. But your silence did something far worse. It forced her to feel the loss of control. It forced her to face her own reflection, and it destroyed the ego she thought was untouchable. Before we start, a quick reminder. The real transformation doesn't happen on YouTube. It happens inside the community. If these videos have opened your eyes, what's inside will rebuild your mindset completely. It's not just a course, it's a brotherhood, a private space where men master attraction, emotional control, and the psychology of power. You don't join for a month, you join for life. Every future course, book, and lesson is yours forever. No subscriptions, no limits, just one decision that changes your direction. If you're serious about growth, discipline, and purpose, click the link below, join the community. Enroll once, grow forever. Let's dive in. Section 1. Why silence hurts more than any explanation ever could. When a man is heartbroken, his instinct is to explain. He wants clarity, closure, and understanding. He wants to tell her how deeply she hurt him, hoping that if she truly understands the pain, something will change. But explanations do not create remorse. They create relief. Relief that she still matters. Relief that she still has emotional access. Silence does the opposite. Silence removes her from the emotional center of your life. It tells her without words that you are no longer seeking validation, answers, or reassurance. And that absence of reaction is far more unsettling than anger or sadness ever could be. Anger still proves attachment. Pain still proves connection. Silence proves independence. At first, silence feels powerless to the man. It feels like surrender, like losing the chance to defend himself or express the depth of his emotions. But internally, silence is not weakness. It is restraint. And restraint carries psychological weight because it is unexpected. A woman anticipates emotional reaction after heartbreak. She expects confrontation, sadness, or at least questions. These responses keep her emotionally central. They confirm that she still holds influence. Silence disrupts that expectation entirely. There is no feedback loop, no reassurance, no emotional mirror. This is where the discomfort begins. She starts wondering why you did not react, why you did not fight for answers, why you did not seek closure. Her mind fills the space your words once occupied. And the stories she tells herself are far more powerful than anything you could have said. Most men break silence too early because they mistake discomfort for distance. They fear being forgotten. They fear missing the chance to explain themselves. But silence is not about being remembered. It is about changing the way you are remembered. A man who explains heartbreak is remembered as emotional. A man who goes silent is remembered as composed. And composure after loss creates cognitive dissonance. It forces her to question assumptions she made about your dependence, your weakness, or your emotional availability. This is not about punishing her. It is about removing yourself from a dynamic where your pain becomes entertainment, reassurance, or ego fuel. Silence denies her that access completely. A Stoic man understands that closure does not come from conversation, it comes from self-respect. He allows silence to do the work that explanations never could. He lets time replace emotion. He lets absence replace argument. And in that absence, the power shifts. She may never admit it. She may never reach out. But internally, silence leaves a mark because it tells her that the man she hurt chose peace over reaction, that he valued himself enough to step away without drama. Silence does not scream. It echoes. And what it echoes is far louder than any word spoken in pain. Section 2. What happens inside her mind when you don't break the silence? When your silence continues, something unexpected begins to happen inside her mind. At first, she feels relief. Relief that there is no confrontation, no emotional weight, no difficult conversation to navigate. She tells herself that things ended quietly, that you understood, that you moved on easily. This stage protects her ego, but relief does not last. As days pass and your silence remains steady, her mind begins searching for explanations. She checks for signs. She wonders if you are angry, indifferent, or simply gone. And because you gave her no emotional closure, her imagination fills the gap. Silence forces interpretation, and interpretation creates emotional engagement. This is where the ego begins to fracture. A woman's ego is not destroyed by criticism. It is challenged by irrelevance. The moment she senses that she no longer occupies space in your emotional world, uncertainty replaces confidence. She expected reaction. She expected emotion. She expected proof that she mattered deeply enough to hurt you visibly. Your silence denies her that proof. Instead of feeling powerful for having moved on, she begins to feel unsettled. She replays moments, conversations, and decisions, not because she wants you back necessarily, but because she needs to understand why she no longer has influence. Influence is comforting. Losing it is disorienting. This is when doubt creeps in. She wonders whether she misjudged you, whether she underestimated your strength, whether the man she thought would always react emotionally turned out to be someone far more grounded than she expected. Most men sabotage this stage by breaking silence impulsively. They reach out to check in, to express unresolved feelings, or to seek validation that they still matter. But the moment you speak, you restore her emotional certainty. You confirm that she still has access, and the internal process stops immediately. A Stoic man does not interrupt this unfolding. He understands that silence is not passive. It is active restraint. It is the decision to let reality speak without interference. He trusts that the absence of reaction communicates more strength than any explanation. As her mind continues to circle unanswered questions, the narrative shifts. You are no longer the man who was hurt. You become the man who chose dignity. And that version of you is harder to dismiss, harder to categorize, and harder to forget. This does not mean she will reach out. It does not mean she will apologize. It means something deeper. You are no longer emotionally available for her ego to lean on, and that absence creates a quiet, psychological imbalance. Silence forces self-reflection. Self-reflection threatens ego. And the longer your silence remains clean, calm, and unbroken, the deeper that realization settles. She may never admit it, she may never say a word, but internally, something has shifted. You did not chase, you did not react, you did not collapse. And in that stillness, you reclaimed something far more powerful than attention. You reclaimed control. Section 3, why silence only works when it comes from self-respect. Silence is powerful, but only when it is clean. The moment silence becomes a tactic instead of a principle, it loses its force. Many men misunderstand this and turn silence into a waiting game. They stay quiet on the outside, but internally they are watching, hoping, checking, and counting time. That kind of silence is felt immediately and it carries no strength. A woman can sense when your silence is rooted in expectation, when it is driven by the hope that she will miss you, regret her decision, or come back differently. That silence feels tense, it feels loaded, and instead of creating reflection, it creates pressure. Pressure invites resistance, not respect. Real silence comes from self-respect. It comes from a man who has accepted the situation fully and chosen peace over reaction. There is no message behind it, no hidden demand, no emotional trap. It is simply the natural result of stepping away from something that no longer aligns. This is why silence rooted in self-respect feels different. It is calm, not cold. It is grounded, not dramatic. It does not seek to punish or provoke. It exists because the man has decided that his emotional energy is no longer available where it is not valued. Most men fail here because they want silence to do the work for them. They want it to deliver justice, validation, or regret. But silence is not a tool for control. It is a boundary, and boundaries are not enforced to change others. They are enforced to protect yourself. When your silence is clean, her reaction becomes irrelevant. Whether she feels it, ignores it, or never reaches out again, you remain centered. Your peace does not rise or fall based on outcomes, and that emotional independence is what gives silence its weight. A woman may never consciously analyze why your silence feels different. She may never label it as strength, but she will feel the absence of emotional availability. She will feel that the door did not close angrily, but it did close firmly. And that finality is what unsettles the ego. This is also where many men are tempted to break silence to prove maturity or kindness. They want to show they are good men. But dignity does not require explanation. Kindness does not require self-betrayal. You can wish someone well internally and still remove them from your emotional world completely. Silence rooted in self-respect is not about pretending not to care. It is about caring enough about yourself to stop engaging in what causes inner chaos. It is the quiet decision to move forward without dragging the past behind you. When silence comes from that place, it does not need to be maintained consciously. It maintains itself. You are not resisting the urge to reach out. The urge simply fades because you are no longer attached to being understood. And that is when silence becomes devastating to the ego, not because it hurts her, but because it proves she no longer has access to you. Section 4. When she realizes your silence is permanent, there is a precise moment when silence stops feeling like distance and starts feeling like finality. It does not arrive dramatically. There is no single message or event that announces it. It arrives quietly when she understands that you are not coming back emotionally, not because you are angry, but because you are done. At first, she believed your silence was temporary. She assumed you were hurt, processing, or taking space. That assumption protected her sense of control. It allowed her to believe that whenever she decided to reach out, you would still be available in some form. But permanence changes everything. When she realizes that your silence has no emotional tension behind it, no waiting energy, no hidden expectation, discomfort replaces comfort. The idea that you are not watching, not hoping, and not holding space for her becomes unsettling, not because she suddenly wants you back, but because she no longer has access to how you feel. This is where the ego feels exposed. A woman's ego is reinforced by influence. Knowing she can affect your emotions, even negatively, provides a sense of significance. When that influence disappears completely, it creates an internal imbalance. She begins to question her assumptions, her impact, and her role in your life. This realization often comes late at night or during moments of stillness. When distractions fade, uncertainty collapses. She remembers how you were present without being needy, calm without being distant, and steady without demanding anything, and in contrast, your absence feels heavier than any argument ever did. This does not mean she will reach out. It means something more important. The narrative changes. You are no longer the man who was left behind. You become the man who chose dignity over reaction, and that shift alters how you are stored in memory. Most men never reach this stage because they interrupt it. They break silence to check in. They seek acknowledgement. They reopen emotional doors that were finally closing. And by doing so, they remove the weight of finality. A Stoic man allows this stage to complete itself. He does not rush closure. He does not need confirmation. He understands that silence has already communicated everything that needed to be said. This is also the stage where detachment becomes real. You are no longer resisting the urge to reach out. The urge no longer exists. Your emotional energy has moved on. Your life has re-entered, and because of that, your silence carries authenticity. Authentic silence cannot be undone. It does not invite negotiation. It does not provoke reaction. It simply exists as the natural consequence of self-respect. When she realizes your silence is permanent, it does not hurt her feelings. It challenges her assumptions. It removes the emotional safety net she did not realize she was standing on. And once that net is gone, the ego must confront reality. She broke your heart once, but your permanent silence ended the story on your terms. Section 5, the one mistake that turns powerful silence into weak silence. Silence only holds power when it is complete. The moment it becomes conditional, it loses its force. The biggest mistake men make at this stage is reopening emotional doors without realizing it, not through messages, but through attention, curiosity, or emotional availability that quietly returns. Many men believe silence is only about not texting or calling, but emotional silence is deeper than that. It is about no longer checking her social presence, no longer replaying conversations, and no longer measuring your healing by whether she notices your absence. The moment your peace depends on her reaction, silence becomes fragile. A woman can feel when your silence is incomplete. Even without contact, energy communicates. If your absence is filled with expectation, waiting, or emotional attachment, it does not feel final. It feels paused. And when it feels paused, it reassures her ego rather than challenging it. This is why some men stay silent for weeks only to break it suddenly with a message that says they were never truly gone. That single action undoes everything. It confirms that the silence was not self-respect. It was emotional restraint fueled by hope. A Stoic man avoids this mistake by understanding a crucial truth. Silence is not something you maintain. It is something that naturally exists when you have fully accepted reality. You are not forcing yourself not to reach out. You simply no longer feel the need to. This acceptance changes your internal posture. You stop monitoring time. You stop waiting for a response that may never come. You stop assigning meaning to imagined reactions. Your attention returns to your own life, your own growth, your own direction. At this stage, silence becomes effortless. And effortless silence carries weight. It feels grounded, calm, and non-reactive. There is no tension behind it, no emotional charge. And because of that, it cannot be manipulated or reversed. This is also the moment when many men feel tempted to be the bigger person. They want to send a final message for closure, forgiveness, or goodwill, but closure does not come from one last exchange. It comes from consistency. Every time you reopen the door, you reset the emotional clock. A grounded man understands that forgiveness does not require access, compassion does not require communication, and maturity does not require explanation. You can release resentment internally without inviting someone back into your emotional space. The real power of silence is not that it affects her, it is that it stabilizes you. When silence is clean, your nervous system calms, your focus sharpens, your identity stops orbiting around the past. And that internal shift is what makes silence unbreakable. Once you reach this point, her ego is no longer the issue. Your peace is, and peace, once reclaimed, is not something a real man gambles with. Silence only weakens when it is tied to expectation. When it is rooted in self-respect, it becomes permanent. Section 6. When you realize silence was never about hurting her. At some point, something shifts quietly inside you. You realize that silence was never meant to punish her, teach her a lesson, or damage her ego. Those effects may happen, but they are not the purpose. The real purpose of silence is far more important. It is about ending emotional dependence and reclaiming your inner authority. Most men begin silence hoping it will make her feel regret. They imagine realization, curiosity, or even guilt. And while that may occur, it is not what transforms the man. What transforms him is the moment he stops caring whether she feels anything at all. This is the moment silence becomes complete. When you stop measuring success by her reaction, your nervous system calms. You are no longer bracing for messages. You are no longer wondering if she noticed. You are no longer replaying scenarios in your mind. Your emotional energy detaches from the past and returns to the present. This is why silence changes a man more than it changes a woman. It forces you to sit with discomfort without escaping into explanation. It forces you to face loss without seeking validation. And through that process, something solid forms inside you. Emotional self-sufficiency. A man who reaches this stage no longer uses silence as a shield. He does not hide behind it. He stands firmly within it. His identity is no longer tied to how he was treated or how things ended. His sense of self comes from alignment with his values, not from emotional outcomes. Ironically, this is often when the memory of you becomes strongest for her. Not because you disappeared, but because you left without resentment. There is no dramatic ending for her to dismiss, no emotional weakness to justify her decision. Just a man who chose dignity and moved on. But by now that effect no longer matters to you. You understand something essential. If someone breaks your heart and loses access to you because of it, that is not revenge. That is consequence. And consequence does not require anger. It only requires consistency. Silence at this level is not cold. It is peaceful. It does not feel like resistance. It feels like release. You are not holding yourself back from reaching out. You simply have nothing left to say. This is where growth becomes irreversible. You no longer romanticize the past. You no longer seek explanations that will never satisfy you. You no longer define yourself by how deeply you were hurt. You define yourself by how calmly you recovered. When a man reaches this point, silence is no longer an action. It is a state, and from that state, nothing that once had power over you can reach you again. She may never know exactly when you let go, but you will, and that is where true strength begins. In the end, Silence was never your weapon, it was your awakening. She broke your heart. And for a moment, it felt like she held all the power. She moved on, she stayed distant, she controlled the narrative. But power never truly belonged to the one who walked away first. It belonged to the one who stopped reacting. Your silence did not beg, it did not explain, it did not chase closure. And that is why it mattered. Silence stripped away. Emotional dependency. It ended the invisible contract where your pain needed her acknowledgement to heal. It returned you to yourself. And once a man returns to himself, nothing external can shake him again. If her ego was touched, it was not because you wanted revenge. It was because you refused to collapse. You refused to perform pain. You refused to give her emotional access after she broke your trust. That quiet refusal is something most people are never prepared to face. This is the truth most men never hear. Heartbreak only has power over you as long as you keep explaining it. The moment you go quiet with dignity, the story ends on your terms. You did not disappear to hurt her. You disappeared to heal yourself. And healing does something remarkable. It changes your posture. It changes your standards. It changes the kind of connections you allow into your life. You stop chasing intensity and start choosing peace. You stop proving your value and start protecting it. Whether she ever thinks about you again is irrelevant now. You are no longer defined by who left. You are defined by who you became. Silence did not make you cold, it made you clear. And once a man becomes clear, he is no longer controlled by emotion, memory, or ego. He moves forward quietly, steadily, and without regret. She broke your heart, but your silence rebuilt you. And that is the kind of power no one can ever take away. Remember, knowledge means nothing without action. If you're ready to rise above emotion and lead with purpose, join the community today at the link below. Enroll once, grow forever.